Good. Wait a minute. Record. Oh, good evening. We are live. Sorry, there was some kind of hiccup there.
No.
This is Lilia from Heal Scotland and Scotland's Wild Medicine. And with me tonight, I've got Craig Grant from Sentient Sessions. Craig also works with animal welfare. He's also a musician and has played at lots of different events in Tarbert. Craig, thank you so much for being part of the festival and giving me your time tonight. How are you?
It's my pleasure. Yeah, doing great actually. Yeah, just back for the forest. A walk in the forest always makes me feel good. So yeah, thanks for
Ah,
having me.
it's so nice, isn't it, that the lighter nights are. It feels like you're actually just getting extra time.
Yeah, yeah, you are. It's like transformative. And I'm actually a wee bit gutted, kind of looking towards the changing of the clocks because, like, I get up and start my day at 6, and it's
Right.
already like broad daylight now by then. But next week it'll be kind of shifted by an hour. But still, it's a good time of year to be alive, you know.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same. I really like that bright light at 6 in the morning. I was in the loch at 8. The sun was warm in my face this morning. That was
Mm,
before it came back to winter, of course.
yeah.
So let's just start with because you and Sarah both work with animal welfare, and I know that you did events as well before. How did you get into that? What was your kind of segue into animal and obviously caring about what's going on in the
Yeah.
planet with regards to animals?
Yeah, so we both like worked in the music industry, and we lived in Glasgow for all of our 20s, and then just kind of got fed up never seeing one another, and so we thought, like, let's just kind of sail up and move back to the country. And as part of that, like, we spent a couple of months doing this work away, like working on organic farm thing
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
with a family in Fife, and they had a small holding. And like, even though I grew up in Peterhead in the northeast, and there's a lot of farmland around about there, but I grew up in the town, and so actually, and then moved to the city in my 20s. So this kind of time on the smallholding, we were there for about a year, actually, all told. They had like 10 sheep and 20 hens and 7 runner ducks and whatever. And so that's the first time I ever got like up close and personal and realized that, okay, wait a minute. So the spaniel has got a different personality to the Labrador, but at the same time, that duck has got a different personality for that duck, and that chicken's and that sheep's got a different. So it was really like an eye opener for me, and I basically, after then, that's when we started getting into working in animal organizations. So that's my kind of my day job now. But I guess alongside that, like we like doing that sort of led us to live in Cornwall for about 8 years, and it was down in Cornwall that I did my yoga teacher training, and then from that just became like really interested in the philosophy side, and like I stayed on with the same uh, teacher, the same studio, to do like a further module on the philosophy side of yoga, and obviously there's a good bit in there about like not harming other beings and stuff like that. So I guess that just kind of deepened what I already had started feeling in that small holding in Fife, really, and it's just grown from there. So it's great.
Yeah, that's so nice. Yeah, it's interesting because you should say that about the personalities because I didn't notice. I noticed that at the farm with the hens. In fact, they called one of the chickens Lilia because she was so cheeky and she would just jump on the table and steal your food and run away.
Yeah, totally.
And
I,
also how they stayed in their little tribes. Some would never come out even when you opened the gate, and others were always up around, looking in. It is
yeah,
interesting. I'd never really thought about it like that, but yeah, for sure. And if you've not been around animals like that, I remember being up at Claire's last year, and she had the goats. They're so hilarious. I mean, I know they eat everything and they can be a bit of a pest, but they were at the caravan window when we were all singing. One of the boys had a banjo, and they were kind of like watching the music, and it's just you just get to see them in a completely different way.
exactly.
So, and I think, yeah, I mean, understanding the way we treat our animals and the way we treat each other is think it's maybe getting even more relevant now as the times get crazier, and it's sometimes you think, what is happening to human beings that they would treat each other and treat animals like that? So you're also a musician, and that's probably more in your spare time now, isn't it?
Nowadays, yeah, it's a young man's game. I feel really lucky because I had a bit of success with that in my 20s. Actually, Bobby Dunn, who appeared at your festival last year, and hopefully Bobby, if you are listening now, hello, is going to be there again this year. I've told him he needs to come up to the house and stay with us. We played together in a band for long years, and I feel just so lucky because I was able to travel the world and all these great experiences. So I've got no regrets, but it's definitely a young man's game. Here I am with my cup of mint tea at 7, getting ready to settle down to bed at 9 now. So that's a totally different thing. But I would say that what's interesting from the point of view of Heal Scotland and the festival is I suppose I got into that creativity because for a young age I had, for me now it's there's a whole load of different yoga practices, right? And you're kind of invited to try out each one, and not everyone's going to work for you. But for me, the things I find most elevating are still to this day, listening to really beautiful music or reading, spiritual books or whatever. But I was well, we can't do a session at the festival about come and learn how to read a book or how to listen to tunes or whatever. But yeah, I would say that even still now, music is, I think of it in the same sphere as yoga or spirituality or just healing. I suppose it can be very healing. And I've never really dabbled with music therapy, but in Cornwall, we live next door to a couple who were sound healers, and I've known folk that have been into sound healing and music therapy as a separate thing and all that. But it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the science that's coming out around you, I mean, the thing is, we know when music makes you feel good. We know that singing together and having a great sing-song, everybody loves it. And there's certain pieces of music that can take you into a really sad place and a really happy place. But I think really what we're realising now is the certain frequencies, it can change your brain waves, which is relatively obvious, but that it can also feed through the cells and help you to release things. And it can actually help you to heal, because anything that you're enjoying actually helps you to heal. And I think we've kind of forgotten that in our world of you should do this and you should do that and you shouldn't do that. We're not so busy making rules. And that's what I love about the whole music thing. It's it's something that people can do and they'll actually want to do.
Yeah.
So tell me what you and Sarah are going to do a kind of double act at the festival. That's the plan, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's not neither one of us wearing a top hat or anything like that, but well, never say never. But I guess I going back to a few things that you said, it's I sort of want to, repetition is good for you, for your brain, it turns out. And endorphins are good for your brain, and you and I have enjoyed repetition and endorphins in the Isla Frigate bar, singing the Beatles choruses over and over again. But that's, it's good for you. But what I wanted to do was do a wee session tagged on the end, because I'm happy to fit into wherever in the program, but I thought if Sarah's given a yoga class and people come down into their rest pose, their shavasana, and then they're all chilled, they'll be in a receptive state to have, do some mantras, which are quite a soothing thing as well. And within that, what I love about Heal Scotland and about the festivals is this, I've heard you say keep the kilt on it or whatever, I'm more and more nowadays about demystifying practices that have come for the East or that are a bit older or whatever, because we can often feel oh, I'm not going to do mantra because that's, those are Hindi words, but actually they're not Hindi. Some of them are Sanskrit and some of them are actually not words at all. They're just sounds. So the ones I want to focus on are the ones that are just sounds. They're so we don't have to feel like we're trying to be disgenuine or whatever by trying out a practice like that. And also, yeah, just kind of break down the barrier a bit and say you're invited to try this repetitive mantra practice and just see if it works for you, and hopefully give something that people can take away in half an hour, and also have a bit of fun in the meantime, you know.
Yes, exactly. I'm all about the fun, as you know. I think that, you know, that the whole community of people coming together and singing, and I really hope you get a chance to come and hear Sue Cali, who does Indian Raga.
Yeah.
So interesting because, you know, it's when Sue said, I'll come to the community, when she lived in the Comical Glen at the time, and I'll do some singing with them. But at that point, I mean, I was like, yeah, fantastic. You know, anybody that's offering to come and do anything, but I really hadn't fully appreciated what happened. And also, I think, you know, when you start sort of singing, a lot of our tension starts in the jaw, you know,
Yeah.
and we're holding things so tight. So as soon as you start sending that frequency and actually using the jaw, and a lot of the stuff she has you doing a very open mouth kind of thing. So even that itself is going to help you feel better.
Yeah.
And never mind how, you know, I'm not even really sure the science of raga. She told me all about it yesterday. I mean, the science is clear. Singing and mantras are absolutely great for you. And you're right. We need to break down the barriers of movement and dance, which is, you know, and singing, which is kind of the most obvious things that humans should be doing. But we're so embarrassed about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, down at Russell Brand's festival, it was a phenomenal curtain band there. And honest to God, he talked about the science, so, you know, exactly this is what we're going to do, and this is what it's doing to your brain, which I thought again was just like really helpful. This is why we're doing it, and you're going to feel good. And there was a dancer there as well, which just kind of got everybody going. And it, you know, and that was a sober festival, you know, because again, it's getting people to do these things sober and realizing you can actually get quite high without to you know, rely on external substances. So I think it's but it's just getting people to experience it once and then they'll get it.
Yeah, totally. And like, I think, you know, I read recently Ravi Shankar talking about how the ragas are like just, you know, humans have essentially discovered how to create or control sounds, and the ragas are just about weaving this tapestry. You know, Ravi Shankar talked about how the ragas can bring you closer to God, basically. But and with kirtan, I feel like with mantra there's sort of two sides, because kirtan is like yeah, exactly like you said, it's like a kind of almost like a drug, because you feed off everybody around you. But I also wanted to try and get across the sort of the solo or the private or the inner side of mantra, where something you can do at home by yourself that might make you feel that same kind of high, like buzzing way, but it doesn't need, you know, because you're not going to get together with 200 people and sing kirtan every day. I mean, maybe some folk will, but not too old for that. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think you know, and people are so stressed. You know, normally for me, if I'm working with people who are seriously ill, you're asking them to make a lot of changes that they absolutely do not want to make. So I think it's so nice to be able to do something that, yeah, maybe you've got reservations and you feel a wee bit, you know, shy, but, you know, just come along and try it. I know in my retreats, I normally have people chanting, and they start off at the beginning of the week, you know, and then by the end of the week, you hear their voice.
yeah.
And, you know, given that these energy centers, especially your voice, and being able to speak up for yourself, and, you know, be very conscious about making sure that people understand what you're trying to say, or what you want to communicate, rather than, you know, all the other kind of crazy things that we do instead of communicating clearly. You know, really, it's so good on every level. So we were talking before we came on live about men as well participating in these things. Now, I can understand my demographic would be, in actual fact, I've got a much younger demographic than you would imagine, or than I would have imagined, starting usually in their 20s. but obviously going all the way up. And there are a few men that come along and enjoy, you know, a lot of the things that I teach. But in general, even when I was through at my friend who's a guy at his workshop at the weekend, it was primarily women, particularly on day one. We had a lot more men in day two. Have you got any thoughts on, you know, how did you feel going into yoga, for example, which maybe for you where it wasn't predominantly women, or was it?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point. Like in Cornwall, I would say that men are a lot more open to like the physical yoga practices. It's definitely a lot more popular there. But even though that's the case, I was the only man on my teacher training course of I think 13 students. And I think that's more common. Like I know fewer and fewer male teachers down there, but even like my female like instructor who taught, you know, led our course, she did a thing called what she called Broga class. And she said, Craig, you need to do one because it's my busiest class and I can't. She said, I'm just like inundated. So I thought, that's a bit daft. But I started it, and fair enough, it was my busiest class, like no kidding. And we had a guy we called Two-Man Stu because he was as big as two men, just a big giant guy. And when it came to the time where I couldn't sustain doing that class anymore, I said, all right, the next week's the last one. And he was gutted. He was like texting me, oh, I'm so sad. I've been so enjoying this, whatever. So I guess like Cornwall is a little bit more amenable to it. And I've, other than that period, like lived in Scotland my whole life. And I guess I've seen like a lot of, my good pal John McCarthy talks about how he's got his own idea of what masculinity is. And, you know, macho and masculinity are two different things. And he gave the example of like the lads are all egging you on to go out to the pub on a Friday night and get lashed or whatever. But he said, actually, I've got to do something for my elderly mum on the Saturday, so I'm staying in to do that. And he said that's the masculine thing, whereas the macho thing would have been the pub with the lads. So I feel like, yeah.
It's a great analogy, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess like, to my mind, especially with regard to Heal Scotland and the festivals, it's like a lot of men that I've met that you know, having a kind of reticence to come to a festival called Heal Scotland is kind of tantamount to saying there's nothing about me that needs healing in that way, you know, whereas our kind of everyday experience tells us that isn't true. Everybody needs some kind of healing. Like, look around you. And so, you know, I just think like what's also interesting to me within that question is that like a lot of the Eastern philosophy texts were written by, I mean, Lao Tzu was reportedly a man or possibly many men working under the same name. Same thing with Patanjali. So like, it's interesting that there's been a shift where it's the interest in it is female dominated. And I'm not sure that I really understand why. But I would say that like maybe I'm lucky in that sense because, as I said, I had that interest in like creativity and a bit more like the interest in the spiritual side of life from an earlier age. Yeah. You know, I've always been up for trying whatever, whereas I can see that it would be a difficult barrier for a lot of guys. But, you know, I'm a bit of a kind of testament of like, just try it. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? You'll feel like a wally for 5 minutes and so what, you know?
Exactly. And to be fair, there's a lot of women that can be intimidated about coming to events too. You know, I always say that you know, it takes courage to show up, you know, to be willing and open to learn. And, you know, I really feel so strongly that we don't really have a choice anymore. We need to learn how to look after this body because, you know, in a few years' time, what's happening to our NHS? It's going to be around to our care system. So if we don't look after the body, then somebody else is going to have to look after it for you. And who is that going to be? So I just feel really we're in a time where it's never been more important to learn about this stuff and to network. And I think, you know, as we see the pub culture die as well, certainly from when I was young, living in Lochilphead, this place had 4 absolutely thriving pubs. and it's not really even got one now. So what else are we going to do? We need to find other ways to network, to meet like-minded people, and to learn. And to me, it's just, I got asked to speak at a festival in Malta years ago, and I kind of wondered why they'd asked me. I didn't. And then when I got there, everybody was so interested in the stuff that I was teaching. I thought, this is the way to do it. Festivals, that's where my people are, the people that love having fun, but are still open. And that's really why I thought and it's got to be fun, it's got to be accessible. Music, comedy, and all the things, that even that talking about raga or kirtan or, mantras, a lot of people will maybe know these words, but not have a clue what it is, and certainly won't have tried it. So you're on your own doorstep, you can get along and find out for yourself, because it's the experience, isn't it? Once you experience it, and it's just overcoming that, the courage. And it is Scotland's Wild Medicine. The whole ethos behind that book is that everything is there in nature for us, to learn about and experience, and to get well, and to and certainly to be on a daily basis more reconnected to nature and feeling more alive. I mean, we're lucky. I'm sure you're the same this morning. The sun was out, and it's just like, where would you rather be when the weather's like that?
I know, but like that's interesting, because like, I also grew up in a fishing town, and Tarbert here is obviously a fishing community, and it's a hard job. It's hard. It takes it out of you, takes it out of your body. And what I found interesting was that, like, during the pandemic, you've got hardy fishermen who were experimenting with getting in the loch and doing a bit of cold water swimming and whatever, and finding that they were getting right into it. And actually, all up and down the UK during the pandemic, cold water swimming was the massive thing. And what I love about Heal Scotland and Scotland Wild Medicine, and I think it's important to say here as well, like, I've taught yoga like one-to-one to other men, and that's the time where I've kind of seen the most kind of like click into place, because you explain it's a whole system, and it's got this kind of mechanical nature, and they get really interested. But putting that to one side, like, I would say that nowadays I get so much more for just walking my dogs in the forest or going and getting in the cold water. So for any guys out there that might happen to listen to this, don't, come along, because you can just do those bits and learn about, don't be scared off by the bits that it's too hippy dippy or whatever. Like, come and just engage with the nature side of it, because that's where it's really at, and that doesn't require anybody to be any kind of macho.
And out at Tarbert Holiday Park at Westhill Shores, we've got David McBride with the kayaks and the sups. We've got Hugh, I can't remember Hugh's second name, doing the forest bathing, going into the forest and really absorbing the connection there, and how that affects your nervous system in particular. And we've got my friend Lorna's out there doing food intolerance tests, and we've got forage walk from there with Heathery Heights. And then we've got all the talks. The Wim Hof instructors will be there too. And we're going to be doing, obviously, we've got the big beach breathe on the Sunday at 2:00. But we've also, they're going to be offering one-to-ones and smaller groups all weekend, so that people can come and, not everybody likes a big group. And if you've got a bit of social anxiety, come along and just chat. These people are going to be hanging out all weekend, so you get a chance to meet and talk to people. Because one of the missions that I have is again, like you just said, demystifying what is homeopathy, what is the ice bath doing to me, what can it help me with my conditions, what is bioresonance, so that if you are well just now, and not a lot of people are, but if you're lucky enough to be well, you're educated in all these things that are on offer. But you can also, if you were ever unlucky to get diagnosed, if you're not feeling great, you know who to call. You know what you were resonating with. Do you do any private sessions in Tarbert? Are you still teaching yoga?
I'm not teaching asana, but like not for any massive reason. Like since Sarah started, since Sarah started teaching again, she's invited me to come and like do one night a week or whatever. And it's been on my mind. But when I was saying earlier, like I found that the people that I taught, the men that I taught one-to-one got most from it. I actually think I personally got more from teaching one-to-one as well. So maybe that's something I could look at. But yeah, I guess on the practical side as well, I'm just like working 5 days a week. I've got 4 dogs, and there's always something happening. You know, so.
But when that was one of the things that put me off yoga when I started, was they'd put you in a position and then walk all the way around the class, and you'd be in that position for far too long, or every day be in it for a different length of time. And I thought, see, when you're a beginner, you actually should just be one-to-one. And then it's somebody focusing on you. I think that's a brilliant idea, and I think the yoga idea is brilliant. Could maybe kick something off like that. We should put that in at the festival. If anybody drops out, maybe we could do one.
Yeah. I mean, it's a daft name, but obviously I quite like it. But genuinely though, what we found, like the reason that we did it in Cornwall, the reason to put it on is because men are sometimes intimidated coming into a room with, 15 other women all practicing yoga who might know what they're doing, and the men doesn't know what they're doing. So it was like more like a kind of safe space kind of thing. So yeah, maybe if there's like a space at the festival for that, maybe if not even this year, in future years. But yes. I mean, my impression of the punters at the festival last year was a real mix of folk from all over, and so I'm hoping that you're going to get the vibe where you're not going to have like only men that are closed off to it or whatever. I guess this is more just like a conversation for kind of future festivals.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think that, I think, like a lot of women are very flexible, and a lot of women do yoga regularly. So you go into a class, they know what they're doing, they know the poses. They're not kind of looking around going, oh, is my elbow the right place or whatever. And that could be, I could totally see that. I know my son went to a few yoga classes, and he was like, couldn't believe how hard it was, because he was so trained in the gym that he recognised that he wasn't doing enough, elongation. So he said he couldn't believe, how he came out. It felt really like he'd done something. And I think that's the other thing. I definitely didn't start enjoying yoga until I found Ashtanga. That's changed now. But when I was like in my 40s, I was in Nepal and I found Ashtanga, and I was like, right, now we're talking. And I loved that and did that. And now I love all of them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, at one point I could have recited the opening Ashtanga chant, but it's all like years have gone by and it's just gone right out of my brain. But I did for a while. I still love the Ashtanga system and the approach. But I guess like bringing it back to this question about having taught guys one-to-one or guys who are interested but they don't know where to start, like it's basically a physical practice that forces you to breathe extremely deeply for a whole hour. And what it's actually about is your whole system getting bathed in oxygen. And at the end of it, you just feel totally blissed. So they might come into it thinking, oh, I've got to hold these poses and whatever, but it's not about that. It's about your breath. Like, and the breath will kind of work the wonders for you. You won't even have to try,
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Because, well, we all know breathing differently changes everything. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, and if there's any guys watching this, if you've got any, you can let us know what we can do to break down that barrier and to really get the men along. And I think you touched on it as well before we finish off, Craig, about the kind of masculine and feminine energy, which is, I think you can see women that don't have enough masculine, you can see men that don't have enough feminine. And I was talking to Graham, one of the Wim Hof instructors, and he's coming to the festival. So you maybe met him last year, I don't know, but you'll definitely meet him this year. And he was saying that, he said that his biggest growth part was actually looking at his feminine energy. How would you put that? How would you put a kilt on that feminine versus masculine energy?
I mean, God, the $1 million question, I suppose. I guess I think of it as like the whole universe is made out of like twin opposing forces, if you like, and that's kind of repeated in a few philosophy texts over the years. And I forget what the Sanskrit words are, Rita and something else, but basically chaos and order, and you've essentially, as part of the universe, every one of us have got these two opposing principles inside of us, and we can call it chaos and order, we can call it the feminine principle and the masculine principle. It doesn't mean femininity. It means the feminine principle. It means that the universe gave birth to itself, and we're all churning through that for 100 years or so. So it's like we have these oscillations inside us, and the kind of terminology we use for that oscillation is not really a big deal, but like masculine and feminine is a kind of nice way to put it. And what's interesting when you start looking at, well, what is the feminine principle? What is that energy like? And you go, oh, actually, that's stuff that I already see inside myself. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't challenge my masculinity. It's just, you know, it might be like I've stopped on my tea break and I just enjoyed a beautiful cloud and the sunset for a wee minute. Whilst, you know, it might be something more, you know what I mean? That's how I think of it.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you for, for doing that. It is exactly that. It's bringing these two energies together, I think. And I think probably, you know, I was talking to my friend, and her mum used to go out and she used to do the garden, and she did a lot of physical work in the land. And then, but even into her house, she always had absolutely full of home baking. And as soon as you went in, it was these beautiful smells, and she fed you and gave you food away with you. So she was just that beautiful delight of, you know, being and doing, which is another kind of way you can look at it.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, yeah, it's the yin and the yang, and being able to balance the two within each of us. And that's, I suppose, what we're all really striving for in these crazy, crazy times. Well, listen, I'm very excited to experience the sentient session. I love that name as well. It's so nice. And yeah, I'll thanks again for your time, and I really, really appreciate you giving us your time at the festival. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really nice chatting to you, and I'm really looking forward to it. I know it's going to be great. I'm praying for good weather.
Absolutely.
No matter what, so.
We all pray. Everybody that's coming, the tickets are going amazing. I don't actually think we've got that many left. So get your tickets. And the early bird finishes on the 1st of April. So anybody that's still thinking about it, make your decision and come along. It's a phenomenal value for 3 days of just fun.
Yeah.
So thanks a million, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks, if not before.
Yeah. See you then, Lilia. Thanks.